Hey everyone, welcome back to this little podcast that could. This is Her Healing Hour, and I am your host, Lisa, also known as the AlkaliYogi. Okay, this week's topic is so interesting to me, that I would like to dive right in. Won't you join me? So this episode was inspired by an interview I heard by Dr. Zach Bush. He was being interviewed by another podcast titled After School. Now, the name of that interview is Chemical Farming and the Loss of Human Health. And the episode of my podcast is titled How Science, including Pharma, Create Problems, Sell Us Solutions, which then create more problems. Follow along, won't you? So after listening to Dr. Bush's interview, I also came across another woman's speech, if you will, online. This woman resides in India, and I felt that what she said tied in very well with the general sentiment of the interview that Dr. Bush participated in. Just to give you a summary of what this woman said, it was basically that were it not for us allowing a corporation to control the seeds of the world, shortages of food or the threat of hunger would not exist. Now, of course, not everyone agrees with this point of view. And a lot of the science that would tell you that there would be a shortage of food were there not a profit-driven corporation handling this for us is probably very biased if we're being true about what science looks like and in fact is today. In case you needed a reminder why corporations exist, and I have said this before, they exist solely to make a profit. Shocking, I know. That actually means that your well-being or that of the planet's or corporate responsibility, if you will, are at best second and third, more realistically at the bottom of their priority list, period. That's just if we're going to call a spade a spade. So the world that we live in today, we have farmers and growers that are forced to buy seeds from one particular company. The provider is a monopoly, and so therefore that monopoly sets the price of seeds and other supplies that food and food growers alike may need. Not surprisingly, food growers find themselves struggling to make enough to cover these cartel-like prices, only to turn around and have to sell their harvest to a subsidized marketplace. We've been told a tale as a result. That tale has created a reality where for-profit companies, or company, is in control of the world's food supply, in essence. Farmers are prevented from practicing biodynamic, organic, even traditional farming practices and methods that protect yields from pests, etc. Don't think for a second that older, wiser traditions didn't have their own way of safely protecting crops and outputting healthy product, minus the toxic runoff into nature, which has now been linked to cancer. Take a listen to my episode 8, where I talk about Roundup settlement to pay out over $10 billion in damages to people that have developed Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer, due to exposure to harmful chemicals that are in our food, grass, soil, air, and water, also known as Roundup. Does any of this strike you as odd yet? I mean, it's natural for people to cultivate, grow, and intimately know their food, yet somehow along the way we've lost our nature and have become accustomed to instead purchasing food from supermarkets. There are fewer and fewer food growers, and ever before. And the people that do grow are bound to very strict rules and regulations and ironclad contracts, not with elected officials, or at the very least those that pretend to be serving us and have our best interest at heart. No, no. They are bound to unscrupulous, profit-driven entities, or in this case, once again, entity. This company, which we are all familiar with, has successfully propagated a narrative that if they alone don't control, don't patent, and hold the rights to all of the planet's, in essence, food supply, seedlings and what have you, that the world will simply not have enough to survive. This playbook is not, in my opinion, entirely new or terribly creative. This idea that if they say, i.e. stay at home, self-isolate, social distance, wear a mask, take a jab that promises only to mitigate symptoms, etc., then the whole of the world, well, it will simply fall apart. That is, unless the patriarchy, which are nothing more than a bunch of elite men with egos, don't take control of everything. Sounds like something out of a storybook. Hard to believe that this is our reality. The whole world system, life on earth as we know it, would die, starve, fall ill even. Well, I'm here to tell you that those things happen regardless. I think that's what they call the cycle of life. It's extremely naive to buy into this idea that man, little old man, can somehow take hold of the reins that keep this entire thing together, this entire picture. And when I say entire, I'm not just talking about the universe, of course, and the food supply. I'm talking about the cosmos, the stars. I'm talking about the cells in our bodies, the atoms, our connective tissue, our joints, our muscles. All of that holds everything and anything together that is life. How the bees pollinate, how honey is procured, how cow manure can serve as fertilizer. All of these things are not controlled or dictated by man. They're dictated by the one source, the one that gave us life. And yet, here comes man, time and time again, telling us that nature simply didn't think of every scenario. And therefore, man has to step in, take control, if you will, hold the reins. All of these billions of variables and potential outcomes and scenarios in an effort to deceivingly give control and protect the masses at large. It just seems like a fool's errand. And it seems slightly egotistical, if not outright sociopathic. I mean, here goes man pretending that it is somehow responsible for or capable of or intuitive enough or intelligent enough to predict these extremely bleak, pessimistic, grim, even catastrophic outcomes. Unless they're able to step in and own certain resources and control them and then distribute them accordingly for a fee. But not after having done some science and genetically modified said resource. Is any of this sounding like lunacy yet to you? Or am I alone? Here's the thing, yeah? When these very same people are presenting their algorithms or their predictions of potential outcomes, they do so with their own biases and self-interest and faults and traumas all in place, which means that they're unable to operate from a heart space, an authentic place, and they're instead operating from a headspace. And whenever you are operating from the headspace, you're dealing with ego. And ego is at best a wild horse, at worst, at times, it is a dark shadow. And so we have to be very aware and just cognizant of the fact that humans are going to human, which means that if you put a human in charge to create an algorithm or to quote unquote science, and I do mean science as in actually performing science, observing behaviors, recording them, manipulating them in a controlled environment, etc. When you do all of these things, you're bringing whatever is the essence of you, whether it's joy or pain during that particular time, and infusing the experiment, the sciencing that you're doing with that. You're not just showing up as a neutral canvas. You're coming with your baggage and in turn passing some of that baggage on to whatever it is you're attempting to observe, hypothesize, if you will. And that's because there's a constant free flow of energy between anything that's living, right? There's constant flow of energy between me and the trees and the insects and the flowers and the water and the sky. I mean, it's constant. That's what nature does. It communicates on a cellular, molecular level. It's constantly happening. It's exchanging wisdom. And that is why, by the way, there's also no waste in the world. We're constantly trying to, spray our food and the soil so that quote unquote weeds won't grow or certain pests won't be pest-like. But everything was created for a purpose. And if you're needing to remove something that annoys you, even though everything has a purpose, even those weeds are really just your soil's report card, letting you know what's missing and what is needed, then at the very least you can find a non-toxic, non-violent, non-oppressive way to curb said pests, etc., etc. I mean, mankind has been living here on this planet Earth for thousands and thousands of years. So the last 70 years or so, however long it's been since we've added chemicals, toxic chemicals at that, to fertilizers and to food, are simply not the only answer. There was something else before, something that was sustainable and long-lasting. And then man got involved and said, hey, I can't make a profit off natural and sustainable necessarily, although they probably could if they were just a little bit more creative. So instead, let me create something that is not natural, that is not imbued with nature's wisdom, that comes from a laboratory and is likely to be taken as synthetic, which then creates an entire domino effect, not only in the soil, in the runoff, but also in the food that grows in that soil that has been sprayed that we then consume. And you see how it becomes this domino effect. Those chemicals now are widespread. They end up everywhere, in our air, in our lungs, in our food, on our skin, in our eyes. So remembering that God, Mother Earth, nature, the universe, Allah, whatever you wish to call her, has thought of everything and forgotten nothing, has a way for you to grow your food sustainably, with abundance, tremendous yields that's more than enough to feed everyone, without there being any negative side effects. If we were just to stop pretending like we could possibly know more and do better than the one that created us and brought us here. There's just, at some point, there has to come a time when you say, and you look back and you say, this is not making sense. let's apply that to another example, something that's going on currently. These same people that are telling us, that if they don't control the seeds and the fertilizer, etc., and if they don't get to play and modify with the seeds, ensuring that you're put in a position where you're having to come back to them every single year because the seeds that they give you don't actually produce any life. Meaning they're, for the most part, good for one use, and then you dispose of them. Think about how then could you consume whatever came out of that seed and expect to A, have life, and B, create life, maybe conceive. It doesn't seem like that would make sense because the food, remember, is the fuel. It's the medicine. It's what keeps everything alive. It's what nourishes. It's what replenishes. It's what restores when you're eating the right food and in the right amount and at the right time. So now if you're eating food that's essentially dead, that's lacking in those wisdom codes and secrets and universes that only the creator could create, and instead you try to pass off something that looks like food but isn't really that, because it doesn't create life, it doesn't procreate, it doesn't continue itself, you're only inviting sickness and illness into the body and a very slow death. One might call it a death by 1,000 cuts. Funny how they're never able to predict that should they just stop trying to control everything, things would be just fine. People would find their way. The universe would course correct. Things would flourish. We would share more. We would have less anxieties and fears because we're not constantly in anticipation of this looming doom, whether it be over a virus or a food shortage. And speaking of virus, let's apply this same concept to what's happening right now. So once again, science has created a problem based on its algorithms, based on its predictions, based on whatever models, which are merely a reflection of the engineer of said algorithms, models, predictions. And if you don't believe me, check out Netflix's Coded Bias, which goes into detail about how anything that's computer generated, AI for lack of a better term, it is in fact AI, is going to unavoidably inherit whatever prejudices, biases, and discriminations are innate in the programmer himself or herself. It's that exchange of energy. It's that free flow, because when energy is not moving, there just simply isn't life. And so when someone is creating an algorithm or a model or a prediction, there's an exchange of energy happening, especially when they're going into the process of creating something. And these algorithms, these predictions, these models are creation. So of course you're going to impart whatever you are holding and carrying. And so because we've seen that, then it's not too hard to grasp that perhaps those same broken individuals who are faulty for being just by virtue of being human, who are susceptible to corruption and bribes and greed, plus whatever trauma, etc., that they're bringing along with themselves, whatever way they were raised and whatever was passed on to them by their ancestors, then you could see how, well, they're probably passing that on even into their quote-unquote predictions of how, again, if a for-profit company didn't have complete and sole control of the world's food supply for the most part, there simply wouldn't be enough. Well, if we're being brutally honest and we're looking at where our health has gone over the last 60, 70 years since we've allowed for this to take place, we have never been sicker. And in fact, we can all pat ourselves for creating a host of diseases that didn't even exist 200 years ago, including lifestyle diseases, including autoimmune diseases, including behavioral and cognitive issues such as ADHD, autism, etc. These are the things that we have managed to create because we stopped eating medicine, also known as food that comes from the soil, and started to eat foods that only look like foods, but are in fact synthetic, genetically modified and engineered, and unnatural. And you can fool the mind. The propaganda can always feed the mind, and the mind can certainly succumb, but you cannot. And they have not yet fooled or figured out a way to fool the body. The body simply will not recognize something synthetic as natural, and therefore it goes into attacking itself. And that's how you start to get things like chronic inflammation, which, by the way, is at the heart of about 80% of all of the ailments that are brand new to us and that are crippling our society and humanity right now and in real time. So, according to their predictions and their bleak outlook on life, this virus, which they may or may not have created based on gain of function, that story is still unfolding. So did science give us that too? We don't know as of yet, but we do know that they have come up with a solution, haven't they? A solution which may lead to more problems down the line. You see, the solution of everyone in the world, whether you've had this virus or not, whether you're young or old, whether you're healthy or have underlying issues or not, you should all take this one particular jab. But the way pharmaceuticals work, I'm going to digress for a second. The way that pharmaceuticals work is that they're based on models and algorithms. In other words, it's more AI. And what did we just say about AI? Are you following me? AI is not free from the defects, the traumas, the brokenness of whomever engineered or created, infused, incepted. Is that even a word? The AI itself. There is coded bias because of that constant free flow of energy. So now you have a formula that is merely AI, right? So it's not perfect, it's not free from flaws, just like the person that created it, is creating a quote-unquote concoction that somehow is supposed to be okay for billions of people on the planet. Billions of people who have individual bio-individuality. That was a bit redundant. Who are unique on the inside, completely unique, just as they would be on the outside. And so because of that, there is no formula that could possibly predict 7 plus nearly 8 billion outcomes, because something that I ingest will act differently in my body than it will on yours, because my chemistry is different from yours, my pH is different from yours, my ancestry is different from yours. I can't eat gluten, perhaps you can. You know, there are many things that I can't and don't consume that you could, and vice versa. Our stomachs are different. So far, at least 19 very different stomachs have been identified. Because science is what? Never settled. And so if science is never settled and we continue to learn about things like bioindividuality and different makeups and different chemistry and different stomach types, then why are we pretending that there's one solution for everything? One jab that will take care of everything for everyone, regardless again of your individual situation and whether or not you've even had it yourself already. And on both sides, both with the monopoly of the seedlings and the food growers, or sorry, the food, let's call it the food supply, if you will, and the people that give us the drugs to quote unquote keep us alive, both continue to get increasingly wealthy and stronger, more powerful, if you will, with more abilities to lobby and to avoid circumstances such as lawsuits from injury. I mean, the whole thing is hilarious. It's really hilarious when you think about it. They continue to get more powerful. We continue to get more sick. We lose more rights. Or did you not notice that we have been told to stay at home for over a year, to not gather, to not work? Many people have lost everything. We have created anxiety and fear that was not necessary because the survival rate was 99% and over. And yes, this particular virus did target certainly a very specific group of people. It was a very small demographic. And that should have been the demographic that should have been focused on in terms of how to keep them safe. Those of us that were already young and healthy and did not have a compromised immune system have been forced to comply to very questionable actions over the past year or so. Let's call it 15, 16 months at this point. Very questionable. And whilst we weren't able to hit the gyms and go to yoga or even gather outside and socialize and do all of those things that naturally boost our immune system because they boost our feel-good hormones and that elevates everything, our health, our wellness, our mental state, our emotional state. Everything they told us to do was the exact opposite of that. And yet, a few have made a great deal of money in providing a solution which they are now imposing on everyone without any care or attention or mention of different circumstances that may, give you other options, like just stay young and healthy. Continue going to the gym, continue to keep your stress levels down, continue to eat a healthy whole foods diet, preferably of real food and not synthetic food if you can find it. None of that is ever thought about, none of that is ever explained, but just like you should only buy your seeds from one company that controls all the seeds, you should only have this one option in order to stay alive. I mean, it doesn't make sense. This kind of control is not only unsustainable, it's absurd. And we really need to demand that these corporations, especially given that they're private citizens and entities, again, who were not elected, who should not even have this kind of power to begin with, are not the only sayers, the only people that have access to intuition and can see into a crystal ball or could lead. Humans are always just going to human. The problem with making icons out of prime ministers and presidents and CEOs is that they're really no different, maybe a little bit more broken than you and I, maybe not. But I would question somebody who feels that running a corporation that is inherently depriving people of their health and their medicine and their God-given rights to be able to grow their own food in whatever fashion they see or deem fit, so long as it's not harmful to anyone else, is like playing God. But the reverse, because it's not heart-centered. And so I don't know if you believe in the devil or not. What I'm saying is you cannot honestly put that much of your well-being and your life and your liberty and your free will, not put into, but simply give away. To whom? People that, if we're being totally honest, once again, guys, don't have a great record Shall we revisit the lies told by the tobacco company in front of Congress about how it's not addictive, or how Big Pharma swore that opioids were not addictive, how it was said that cigarettes were actually good for your health, that they lowered anxiety, but they couldn't cause cancer, how fertilizer couldn't lead to cancer, except that glyphosate does cause cancer in human beings, which is why Roundup, which is Bayer, which is Monsanto, was charged and then found negligent, or not even negligent, found to have to pay out, as of just last year, June 2020, over $10 billion in damages for causing cancer in consumers that were exposed to glyphosate. Here's the doozy. We are all being exposed to glyphosate because it literally is in 75% of the air and the water atmosphere. Glyphosate is a form of antibiotic. It's a form of resistance. It's a form of war. Anytime you're resisting something, you're going to war with it. And when you do that, you create superbugs or super fill in the blank. That's what antibiotics did. They led to superbugs. The same way that the flu jab has led to you needing to get a top-up every year because every year there's something new. Instead of allowing your body to do what it was designed to do, which is go through these rites of passages, whether it be the flu, whether it be chicken pox, and then just build yourself up again to be stronger from the inside, knowing that you have acquired true immunity, long-standing immunity that only nature could give you. Instead of doing that, we're told to just sit, Netflix and chill, order in some tacos, and not worry about it. Pop a pill, take a jab. It's lunacy. We are not well. We are sicker than we've ever been, and it's because science continues to create a problem and then happens to have a solution that is very, very profitable for a very, very small group of people, whilst everyone else is losing their health, their savings, their home, their sanity, as they're being told to sit, be quiet, muzzle up with a mask, and social distance. Anyways, I think I've given you a lot to think about. Are we getting ready to make a change? Are we getting ready to demand better, demand our rights back? Whether it be to grow food, to have our own seeds, whether it be to build up our own immunity by training, going to bed on time, staying hydrated, reducing our stress, and avoiding putting foreign objects in our bodies that have no proven history of integrating well. And when once again, because of bioindividuality, simply cannot give an outcome to how it's going to react in my body versus yours. It's just not possible. Like I said to you, any success that you have seen with quote unquote pharmaceuticals is merely by chance. And by the way, even after they handle one symptom, they create a whole other problem. So again, the spiral continues. What did I just say? Science creates the problem and then conveniently provides the solution for a price, which then creates another problem. That's why at the end of every advert that we are forced to sit through by Big Pharma, there's a huge long list of potential side effects because they simply cannot account for the offshoot targets that were not meant to be targeted but happen. It's like playing pool, yeah? You shoot for the 8 ball, you think you're going straight down the middle, but things then start to pop off and shoot off. That is exactly what happens in the human body when you ingest something that's unnatural, that's meant to target and isolate one thing. What did the commercials say towards the end, or the last 20, 30 seconds? They're running off potential kidney failure, liver failure, potential dizziness, nausea, blurred vision, even death. Well, at least they're being honest and letting us know that, hey, all of these things can happen because you're all individuals and different. Whoa, what a concept. And so maybe because of that, we should have more autonomy, more say in our own health and well-being. And maybe the same could be applied to food. Maybe how I want to grow food is different from how you want to grow food. There are so many continents and ancient traditions, and people have been eating for thousands of years. I promise you, that's how they managed to survive. Whether they were nomads or settlers, they always found a way to eat, and yet they did so without having to poison the earth, the water, the air, and the food itself. They didn't have to change food from real to plastic or fake. And we never lost that right. It was our right then and it's our right now. And so the sooner that we start saying no, the sooner we can actually work towards getting healthy. Everyone has a right to their own way of doing things, especially if and when they're not harming others. We have to stop pretending like there's any possible way to take control of this planet, of something as major as food supply. Nature is far more complex and intelligent than we've given her credit for. And the minute we return the reins of control back to her, the sooner we do that, the sooner we get back to feeling like human beings. The sooner we'll get back to wanting and yearning and craving and actively going after human connection and not settling for virtual. The sooner we'll have the ability to cultivate more authentic, deeper relationships that we can actually hold on to, even during hardship. The sooner we do that, the sooner we get back to being. The part of human being is the being too, and we have lost that along the way. We've just become human, but mostly on autopilot human. The being part requires being still, being at peace, being able to hear that constant communication that's going on between the trees and the grass, tuning into the insects, communicating with the flowers communicating with the sun, because we are a part of all of that. We've moved away from that because we have been conditioned to believe that some people are greater, more wise, and more in tune, and therefore should lead us. Therefore, we can afford to dumb ourselves down and allow for others to sell us something that looks like food but really isn't, and tell us that the only way to survive something that has a 99% recovery rate is for all of us to take a concoction that, once again, doesn't even protect you or give you immunity, because it's not a cure. It's an experiment. Anyways, I've given you loads to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, your omissions, your deletions. Thank you for listening in, tuning in, looking in. Until next week, I bid you adieu. Bye-bye.